Hey, Chicago Fire and MLS fans and Leagues Cup and World Cup fans. This is Nick back with the next episode of Feed the Fire, the Chicago Fire podcast. And we are talking about all of those various tournaments and leagues and teams in tonight's episode. The Chicago Fire kicked off their Leagues Cup campaign with a dramatic win against Minnesota United at Minnesota United and clipped the wings of the Loons and have sent the Loons a message, as well as a message to the rest of the league that, hey, the Fire actually might be legit. That 5 wins in 6, not as big as a fluke as we may have thought it was before, as I definitely thought it was before. We're going to talk about all the action in that game, the goals, the plays, the subs, the moves that were made. We're going to hear our featured guest, John Donovan, give his reaction to that. And then we're going to dive into what has been going on around the league. We've been so focused on all the great matches in Leagues Cup, the initial dominance by the MLS, the goals that were being scored, and then seeing the big hitters from Liga MX come up, Leon, Toluca, Club America, Tigres, Monterrey, and they start putting up numbers against the MLS clubs. We've been so focused on that. We have missed tons and tons of transfer talk. And we're going to focus on the Eastern Conference's big moves in the second half of this show. And then we'll touch on a little bit of the U.S. women's national team as well. I think I'm going to get on my soapbox for a quick minute, just a quick minute, and we will get you on your way so you can go and enjoy the Chicago Fire's hopeful victory against Puebla that is coming up right after I wrap up this recording of this show. Without further ado, let's take a look at that Minnesota United game, an incredible match where the Chicago Fire defeated the Loons 3-2 in Minnesota. And this was a different Fire team. I think we can say that after this performance. A couple weeks ago, I said, did they turn the corner? Yeah, they did because they were getting results, but they're still kind of the same old Fire. But this, to me, they actually look like a different team who have really turned a corner. And I don't know if it's coaching, just timing in the season and allowing the players to gel and work together a little bit. If it's the opposition who's consistently kind of underrating the Chicago Fire, getting some lucky breaks, or maybe it's a combination of all of that. But I could not believe how the Chicago Fire won this match, especially because when I saw the starting lineup, I was really disappointed. You had Shabilko starting as striker, Shaqiri's on the bench, Herbers was starting as your D-mid instead of Pineda, who's been solid, and Spencer Rishi is in goal instead of Chris Brady. These are all moves where I'm like, they know this isn't the U.S. Open Cup, right? That this is Leagues Cup, that this is bigger than the U.S. Open Cup to a certain extent when it comes to maybe prize money and Champions Cup eligibility and stature within North American soccer. Like, they know they don't have to roll out, a mediocre second-rate squad here to just kind of manage legs. Like, the schedule's fine, right? I was really disappointed when I saw that starting lineup. But where I will give credit, got to give credit where credit's due, Klopas may have put out a suspect starting lineup, but when Minnesota scored that first goal about the 62nd minute, he made substitutions, he made moves, and they were the right subs after that goal for 2 reasons. First of all, like I mentioned, these guys should have already been starting, at least in my opinion. But second of all the guys who got subbed out had something to do with the goal that was conceded to give Minnesota the lead. Shabilko drops much deeper, and he's been doing this all season. And if you're the lone striker up top, you can't be doing this, which is why he needs to be played in a different kind of a system and why he was a terrible signing from the start. We digress. We know all these things already. But he drops so far deep to try and receive a pass from the center backs that he ends up playing it as a dummy to allow it to go through to Torres. So here you see your striker is now on the defensive side of at least 2 players, right? I saw Gutierrez starting to push up a little bit. We saw Torres upfield. I don't know what Shabilko thinks he's doing, making that drop, making that deep play, but then also letting the ball dummy through to Torres. You're in the middle of the pitch. Not the spot to be playing a little dummy, especially when your teammate doesn't expect it and when Minnesota has numbers around you, right? So Torres does not expect it, can't make the best first touch on it, but he compounds his error by making just a lazy attempt to recover. He ends up either tripping or going down and isn't quick to get back up. And it's a turnover right in the middle of the field. Minnesota's immediately going the other way. Herbers doesn't read the play and how it's developing. He is making like an offensive run, like he's running down the field, waiting for Torres to pass him the ball after Torres has turned it over. He does not recover. Torres does not recover. Shabilko does not recover. Even Gutierrez, who doesn't get subbed out in this moment, he does not make a really hard recovery run. Maybe you give him a break because he is in that attacking midfield role, but you can't give a break when it's a counterattack by the opposition and then you're just kind of standing around. So all these guys are at fault for allowing this counterattack to start to develop, and then the fired back line gets caught in transition, and we've seen that they are unable to do that throughout this season. So that was kind of the norm there, the transition defense by your back line. And Minnesota, Longwane is open, finds the back of the net. Richie does an okay job cutting down the angle, but he was really, really leaning near post. And Longwane, to his credit, goes far post, puts Minnesota up. So that is my take on that development. And it changed the entire game. One, from the scoreline, but two, Klopp said, we got to get these guys out of here. So within 4 minutes of that goal, Doumbia is in for Herbers, Kamara is in for Shabilko, and Shaqiri comes off the bench for Jairo Torres. And then about 5 minutes after that, they are maintaining possession. They're getting in dangerous areas. Gutierrez, some great individual play here, gets into the box. Rather than trying to work the ball around, he's like, let me get into the box and see if I can't make something happen. And I can still work it around if I need to. Takes on two defenders, splits them, gets fouled, draws the PK. And what a moment here in Fire Folklore with Xherdan Shaqiri and Dane St. Clair, the Minnesota goalkeeper, just talking trash back and forth about it. And they are chirping, they are trash talking, they are really making a spectacle of this impending penalty kick. And Shaqiri gets the better end of it in this moment. He scores. He's pointing at St. Clair. He grabs the ball. He runs off with it. And all Dane St. Clair can do is just have that look that all goalies have on their face when they get scored on. Just kind of, roll your eyes up, pretend you're watching the monitor, making sure the other team doesn't think that you can hear everything they're saying to you. But we know St. Clair heard it. We know Minnesota's defense heard it. And you know what? Minnesota could have buckled a little bit here. So I'll give them credit where their credit is due, that they came back and score and take the lead again. But we got to point out the fact that Shaqiri, while it maybe wasn't the best placed penalty kick, because it was just kind of to the right of St. Clair, he got St. Clair going left, fortunately, and just blasted this ball. So even had St. Clair guessed right, there was still a good chance that it either gets past him or deflects in. So this was great, just kind of mental game here from Shaqiri, as well as a well-taken penalty kick to equalize. And just the photos and the memes and that look on Shaqiri's face. Yeah, that's not a look you want to see when you're a goalkeeper. Something to keep a lookout for in the future, Fire fans. So now we're level 1-1. And Minnesota goes up 2-1 just a few minutes later. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised by that as a long-suffering Fire fan, because they've never really done a good job this season of taking positive momentum and extending it into 2 and 3 goal leads, or killing off games, or maintaining possession, or really responding to how Minnesota came out with so much energy after giving up the lead. Also, if you look at this again, it was the Chicago Fire's backline and center defensive mids here, like, not communicating. You saw 5 Chicago Fire defenders marking 3 Minnesota attackers, and Hlongwane off on the end all by himself, gets the ball played to him and finds the back of the net. So again, not the best performance from your back line tonight, and there's a lot of communication issues that have to get worked out. Now, maybe part of that is because you have Tehran, who is starting, and in this match, he hasn't had a good run of games just due to injury, limited minutes, things with Doumbia coming in. Maybe there were some communication issues there as well. And we know Navarro and Suke like to push forward and help get in on the attack, so maybe they were hesitant to drop back and get in. But there was a lot of communication errors that need to get fixed by the Chicago Fire, and fixed fast if they want to have any sort of chance and making a run in this Leagues Cup tournament. So again, that didn't surprise me that they gave up a quick goal, but what's surprised me and what has surprised me throughout this game is the Chicago Fire coming back to level and then take the lead. Now, when they get the equalizer here, it's also as a result of Klopas putting in substitutes at the right time. He saw this goal given up, came right down the middle, so he gets Gaston Jimenez and Brian Gutierrez out, and in comes Pineda and Koutsias, and that translates into a little bit of possession, leading to the equalizer. Navarro and Shaqiri are on the left wing, and I get so worried because they were so far in the left corner, the left attacking corner, and Suke was pushing up the field. I'm like, great, they're going to get counterattacked. You've got all your defenders, you got your wingers up, you've got your strikers up, you've got your midfielders up. There's going to be nobody to stop this impending 4v2 Minnesota breakaway here, right? But somehow Navarro gets the cross off. It just goes past the outstretched fingertips of Dane St. Clair, rolls all the way across to Suke, who's at a really tight angle, just outside of the box, about even with the 6-yard line. Really tight angle, especially to play it with his right foot off the bounce. Does an excellent job of just passing it to the back of the net, and that levels the Chicago Fire. Fantastic. I was so worried watching the buildup that this was going to go the other way and be 3-1 for Minnesota that I just felt relief that it was 2-2 Chicago. And then that was in the 79th. And then Kamara gets the winner, like so many times he has done in his career before, where all he needed to do is get a little bit of space and powers a header to the back of the net. And it was some good buildup with Shaqiri and Pineda. And I love that Shaqiri is really starting to develop some rapport with a number of players. We saw early on how well he could work with Gutierrez, how he liked playing quick attacking balls through or over the top to Koutsias, because Koutsias got young legs just sprinting constantly. But now we're starting to see him play a little bit better with Suke. And here with Pineda, he works a little short game with Pineda. Pineda gets into the space and chips a short one over to Kai for the winner. So this is excellent. An excellent, excellent win. It was dramatic. It was fun. There were goals. The Fire get the 3 points. They don't have to go to penalty shots. It was great, but also it was a team win from the coaching to the starters to the bench players to everyone involved leading up to this game. A solid team win. Now, I think there's more to take out of it than just this is a great win and let's keep the momentum going for this League's Cup run. I think it gives some hints to the roster. And really, this could be the microcosm. This could be the example that whoever the next GM is, again, assuming that Heights is out or just moves to Lugano, whatever it is, as long as he's away from the Chicago Fire, I'll be happy, that Shabilko, Herbers, Torres, and Jimenez are not the guys to be winning games for the Chicago Fire. And at best, they are subs and depth pieces on a team that will make a playoff run. We're not there yet, but I think that shows that the writing is on the wall here as a result of this game. And also, I think it shows that the Fire want to win these games, and that matchup against Puebla should be a banger. Now, moving to the Minnesota side of things, very disappointing loss for them, especially after the way they handled Puebla in that first game 4-0. But even despite this result, Minnesota has clinched a spot in the knockout round. The Fire are going to need to draw Puebla to advance at the very least. But if they lose, they'll be knocked out by virtue of the head-to-head tiebreaker there. And as we said, a win in Leagues Cup gets you 3 points. A penalty win gets you 2 points. Draw and a resulting penalty loss, only 1 point. And then a regulation loss, 0 points. And just in case you were wondering, the tiebreaker criteria, first it starts with head-to-head, including PKs. But if there are multiple teams who are all on the same number of points, it'll go to goal differential, then goals scored, then goals allowed, then fair play, how many yellow cards, second yellow cards, red cards, etc. That teams have, and each of those is assigned various points. And if all of those fail, then it's a blind draw to see who advances. And again, Chicago taking on Puebla right now, I better hurry up and get to the second half of this show so I can go up and catch kickoff for that match. And speaking of getting to the second half of the show, I want to remind everyone that this show is brought to you by Skira Icelandic Spring Water, Icelandic for clear, Skira water comes from a spring in a government-protected nature preserve in Iceland with naturally low mineral content. This isn't your average water, clearly. Yeah, pun intended. It's one of the best. And Skira is available at your local 7-Eleven. So as you're on your summer road trips, as you're out and about, as you're walking around cities and parks and places and towns, hop into a 7-Eleven, grab a bottle of Skira. They support the podcast. They are fans of soccer. And they also support our next segment, our featured guest, John Donovan, here with his takes on the Chicago Fire and the victory over Minnesota. We're going to take a short pause on YouTube, but for everyone on the podcast side, John, take it away. John, thank you so much for supporting the show, for giving us your take on everything. And remember, the show and John's segment is brought to you by Skira Icelandic Spring Water, available at your local 7-Eleven. Now, with what little time I have before the Chicago Fire kickoff against Puebla, we got to run through some big transfers here that have taken place in the Eastern Conference, because it has been a busy summer for the league, for the conference, and I'm probably going to leave out a few transfers, but we got to hit the big ones here, right? Let's start with the home team, Chicago Fire. They signed Ousmane Doumbia, who I broke down his career and his stats last episode. Make sure you go back and find that one so you can get up to speed with all of that. But Fire fans need to relax when it comes to this transfer window. Everyone has been saying, why aren't we doing more? But everyone is also saying, we don't want George Heitz to sign any players. He's been terrible at it. So you can't have your cake and eat it too here, Fire fans. Either accept the fact that we're not going to make any signings, that we don't want George Heitz to make signings, and we're not going to get any, or just say you have enough confidence in George Heitz where you want him to sign somebody. I know nobody's going to want to say they have enough confidence in George Heitz to make him want to go out and sign somebody this summer window. So just temper things a little bit. And remember, you can't have it both ways. Again, there have been dozens of other moves, but here are some of the big ones. A couple coming out of New York City. Remember, Taty Castellanos, remember him? That brilliant striker out of New York City. Well, he had been on loan to Girona. He was not fully transferred. His rights were not transferred. He had been on loan to Girona and was still under contract with New York City. Well, they have now officially transferred him to Lazio in Italy. It is reported to be $16.7 million transfer fee, a fantastic amount for this young striker with tons of promise. I'm hoping there's a sell-on clause in there. If he can bang in, 15, 20 goals for Lazio and then get another big move and send some more money back to MLS, it would be phenomenal. So good for Taty. Congrats to him. And New York City's doing business. They also loaned out, loaned out Andres Perea, or received him from Philadelphia in return for $300,000 in GAM. That's it. They got him. My notes are all backwards here because the way the headline was written sounded backwards. But anyway, New York City is giving $300,000 in GAM to the Union for Andres Perea. He's a 22-year-old, likely to be a depth piece for New York City, but is reliable player. Could see decent minutes depending on the congested schedule of New York City as they're trying to climb in the standings, as points start to become a premium later on in the season, and Philly gets some money, which is a good move for both parties here. We all know about Inter Miami, right? Messi and Busquets, the well-known signings here. We've talked about all that. Everyone's talked about all that. But they've also signed Jordi Alba and Paraguayan midfielder Diego Gomez. Now, Gomez is kind of the exciting signing from a roster building standpoint. Jordi Alba is kind of the exciting signing from a big name, I'm going to come back and play with Messi standpoint. But Diego Gomez is a U22 initiative signing. He won 2 titles in Paraguay playing for a top flight team there. Miami also signs midfielder Facundo Farias, another U22 initiative signing from Club Colón in Argentina. Now, this is the guy that they are kind of looking to the future for if this contract means anything, whether it's their financial future or their on-the-pitch future. He's 20 years old. His contract is through 2026, so that's 3.5 seasons. He's got options through the 2027, 2028 season. So it really shows that they've got a lot of confidence and trust in him to lead this team, either as the development player we can start selling to clubs around the world, or they can develop around him in MLS. What's even bigger news than than the Miami signings outside of Messi and Busquets is what's going on in Columbus. They just today, Monday the 31st, announced their transfer of Lucas Zelarayan to Al Fateh, the club in Saudi Arabia. This was stunning news to me at first. Like, their offense is one of the best in the league. They're pushing to win another trophy. They looked good in Leagues Cup. They're, top half of the Eastern Conference playoff picture. They just needed to shore up their defense a little bit, and they probably could have a legit trophy run. And here they go out and sell their leading scorer and the face of their franchise. Heck, one of the faces of MLS over the last few years to the Saudi Arabian League. Now, say what you want about comparing MLS and Saudi Arabia, Ronaldo versus Messi's comments, all that stuff. It's all ridiculous. We all know MLS is a much better league than Saudi Arabia at this point. And that Saudi Arabia is buying players, essentially. I don't know anything about their infrastructure, but we've seen how Major League Soccer is requiring new franchises to build stadiums, develop academies, all these sort of things. And the way the roster rules are set up, you get rewarded for developing academies and facilities and all these sort of things. Whereas the top 4 clubs in Saudi Arabia are all owned by the state or the royal family, whatever you want to think of it as. So we can see the differences in the leagues in a lot of different aspects here, right? And I think if anyone doesn't think MLS is better than the Saudi League, give it 5 years and then you'll absolutely see why MLS is better than the Saudi League. But anyway, I was stunned by this, stunned that Zelarayan would move, but I looked a little deeper, and it doesn't actually seem like a terrible move for the Columbus Crew here. Now, remember, Tim Bezbatchenko is the president there. He was the one that constructed all those great TFC teams in the late 20-teens, right? The ones who were winning trophies with Javinko, Bradley, and Altidore when they were in their MLS prime, right? He knows when the right time is to move on from a player. And Zelarayan is 31 years old, right? So he is on the back end of his career here. 31 years old. Still the team's leading scorer, though. But he knows he's got to move on from the player at some point. And when Saudi Arabia comes calling with their big bag of cash, I mean, they signed him for a transfer fee of $8 million. If they can get 10 to 12 million for him at the very least, this would be an excellent financial move because they already won the cup with him in his first season. So it really makes sense if you look at it from a purely financial and club building standpoint, despite all of the emotion and all of the fan favoriteness tied up with Lucas Zelarayan. It also kind of makes the Julian Gressel signing. Again, a few days prior, they had signed Julian Gressel from Vancouver. It makes it make a little bit more sense because why would you sign Gressel, who's an offensive player, when you already have the best offense in the league? Well, you're losing your top scorer. So now Gressel is going to have to help offset some of the goal production, both in scoring as well as assisting Cucho Hernandez. I think he's going to play a little bit more from the wing, whereas Zelarayan played a little bit more centrally. However, they are supplementing it a little bit, and I guess they hope the other strikers on the team can step up a little bit. Additionally, from the Crew's perspective, they parted ways mutually with goalkeeper Eloy Room, and they transferred center back Milos Dejanek to Red Star Belgrade. I wonder if that has something, those defensive transfers and parting of the ways have something to do with them also allowing 33 goals, which is the most out of the top 6 clubs in the Eastern Conference. Sticking with the East, but moving to a different country, Toronto FC is trying things. They send Ayo Akinola to San Jose for an international roster spot and end up signing South African forward Cassius Mailula as a U22 initiative signing. Now, this kind of follows the traditional MLS thinking that you sign offense and you build defense. You use your homegrowns, you use your domestic roster spots, you use interleague moves to kind of build your defense, and you go out and you sign offense. And I think it also still holds true because they've traded center back Matt Hedges to Austin for $375,000 in GAM and up to another $100,000 in GAM if Austin picks up Hedges options for 2025. So potential to get a good return on a defensive player who's just not fitting in and just not doing it well in Toronto. They get that international roster spot for Ayo in order to sign Cassius Mailula. And again, if they can develop him and make him an average MLS striker, that'll be huge because then they can build some midfield around him. If they develop him into an above-average MLS striker, well, then they can sell him and maybe make back some of the money that they lost on signing Bernardeschi and Insigne, who have not performed since coming over. Also, Eastern Conference, maybe not a favorite at this point, but they think of themselves as favorites. Nashville signed striker Sam Surridge from Nottingham Forest. The fee here is reported at about $6.5 million. Now, Surridge had 2 goals and 18 assists in 213 professional appearances. I feel like that's not accurate, and I have to go back and check my typing again. But he's played for Nottingham Forest. He's played for AFC Bournemouth. He's played for Stoke City. He's played in the top flight in England and in the Championship, and he helped Nottingham get promotion, right? But was largely a reserve in this last season. Now, people were criticizing this signing, but I tend to agree with the people who say this is a sign of MLS's rising stature in the international game, right? And I mean that in the sense of appealing to players here. It's my guess that Surridge could have signed with a number of other English championship teams if he wanted to stay in England, maybe get another shot at the Premier League, or he probably could have signed with like a lower tier Premier League team, maybe even signed in like the Netherlands, Belgium, Portugal, maybe a lower League One team. Like he probably could have done that, but he ends up here not just in MLS but in Nashville, because who does he get to play with in Nashville? He gets to play with Hani Mukhtar, league MVP, Walker Zimmerman, Anibal Godoy, Randall Leal, Jacob Schaffelberg, Jan Gregus. I know you guys are thinking like Schaffelberg and Gregus, what's so great about those guys? Well, all the names I just listed all play on their respective countries' national teams, except Hani Mukhtar. He has not gotten a cap with the German senior team, but I think we can all understand that the competition for the German senior team may be just a little bit more so than what the other guys there were playing against. But still, you have guys who have played for their national teams, who have played at some of the highest levels in CONCACAF, and for Jan Gregus' standpoint, a little bit in Europe, right? So you got a decent pedigree if you look at it from that perspective. And so for him to come to Nashville, I think also shows that the league stature is rising. Not just Messi came over because they set him up with a great business deal, but the level of play and the lifestyle that these players live is much better in MLS than many other places. Finally, out east, Orlando City. Welcome back, fan favorite Junior Urso. He's a 34-year-old midfielder now. He came up clutch for Orlando City several times last year and ended up not being able to get extended and going back to I forget where he's from, what club he ended up joining, but now he is back with Orlando City. I do expect him to see some good minutes, but mostly as a second half game changer. He may get a run of starts, especially if the coaches know him, the players know him, and he knows the opposition. He'll be with Orlando City through this season, but they do have a club option for him for next season. But here's the good business part of it. They get him on a free transfer. Not a bad bit of business. Again, a guy who knows the team, the coaches, the league, everything. Knows the fans, knows how to act, knows how to play. And again, guys, these transfers, this was just the Eastern Conference. Maybe I'll have to look back and do a Western Conference recap next episode, because LAFC made a bunch of moves. I'm even forgetting moves that Montreal has made. Like, there's a lot going on. Where this comes back to the Chicago Fire, though, is that we know the Fire are in a playoff spot right now. They're in 8th place in the East. Are they going to be able to keep up with all these other Eastern Conference teams, right? All these teams that we talked about, with the exception of TFC, who's in the bottom, and then New York is still fighting for a playoff spot, but they're not that far out. All these teams are ahead of the Fire. So whereas the teams ahead of you are getting better, the Fire have stayed stagnant. Again, whether or not that's a sign that George Heights is not long for this organization, or whether or not it's a sign of they realize they can't just start spending money to spend money when they can't get the players they've identified to help them. So this does not bode well for the Chicago Fire in the second half of the season, that the rest of the Eastern Conference is getting so much better, and the Fire, by virtue of standing still, are moving backwards. Maybe this momentum that they've got now, maybe this gutsy play and the developing chemistry that they have, and the coaching staff pulling a little bit of the right moves, pulling a little of the strings at the right time will help that. But we'll just have to wait and see, because I'm still not sold that the Fire are guaranteed a playoff spot or run in the playoffs, especially. Now, to close out the show, we need to make a nod to the women's national team, the U.S. women's national team, who are playing in New Zealand and Australia right now for the Women's World Cup. They opened group play up with a 3-0 victory over Vietnam, and as people would say, an unimpressive 3-0 victory over Vietnam. Then they draw the Netherlands 1-1 in their second match and are playing Portugal in the wee hours local time here in their final group stage match. One that people say they need to win. I haven't done the math within the group and looked at all the other possible outcomes, but if you draw or lose, you open yourself up to getting eliminated in what would be embarrassing fashion. But the way they handled themselves that second half of the Dutch game, I think that is more how the United States are playing than the first half of that Dutch game or that first half of the Vietnam game. So I'm still confident that they will get the win against Portugal and move on. And I think I saw a statistic out there that the United States has defeated Portugal 10 times with a goal differential of like 39-0 or something ridiculous like that. So I am confident, not just in their current ability, but historically as well. But again, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, let me get on my soapbox here a little bit. I'm not like some U.S. women's national team insider, or I follow the team. I just enjoy watching them play in the World Cup, in the Olympics, in their competitions. I enjoy supporting my national teams, especially the soccer teams here, right? So I'm not going to sit here and start giving you tactical analysis or trying to get in the heads of these players and what we need to do. Like, no, there's too many people who are all of a sudden instant online experts on the women's national team. So when you're looking for coverage, make sure you're looking for legit news sources, either the broadcasters on the big networks who've been around the game and who've been around the women's national team especially, or look for some of your local guys who are covering NWSL, the women's league here in the United States, where a lot of these women's players are playing, and they have been following them and know about them. So just make sure that you know that. Now, going to look forward, I do think the U.S. wins this game. They win the group, and they will likely match up with Italy in their first knockout game. And after that, it could be Norway, Switzerland, Spain, Japan, all possible opponents. By the way, Spain and Japan scoring 8 and 7 goals so far in their first 2 matches. They are clicking on offense. And so I still think the U.S. women should win this World Cup. I still think they will win this World Cup, but we have to give credit that they're not playing at their best, and that margin of difference, or if you want to call it the margin of error, right? The talent gap, even between the United States and the rest of the world, is shrinking. And not just the United States and Brazil, or just the United States and we'll throw Canada and England there too, right? It is 6 or 7 other teams, like some of the ones that I just named: Norway, Switzerland, Spain, Japan, Canada, Brazil, who are all improving and catching up. I'll say catching up to the United States. I don't think they have the sustained success and the sustained pipelines like the United States has, but they're getting there with these leagues, with these women's leagues in England and Spain and Italy and elsewhere. So you're seeing the talent gap close, but do they have all the other stuff around it, like that aura of invincibility, like that mentality that I've read about U.S. players saying, even if we're losing, all we need is a minute on the ball, and we believe we can come back and score and tie and win the game. So that is kind of what I wanted to say about the U.S. Keep watching them, keep supporting them, find good sources. Don't just get your opinions of the U.S. women's team on Twitter, or for that matter, anything on Twitter. I'm sorry, X. I don't know. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. You guys know what I mean. But with that, I'm going to hurry up and sign off and go up and catch the Chicago Fire to play Puebla. Please keep in touch with me on Twitter, Facebook, at Glasshouse Soccer, or via email, glasshouseSoccer@gmail.com. Like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast, and as always, let's go Fire, let's go U.S. women, and enjoy all the matches, everybody.